So I like to ask all of the guests who come on the show, what about them? When did they first kind of experience the idea that people were categorized into different races and that there was a hierarchy based on those races with some people on the top and other people on the bottom? And when did that stuff really become real for you?
So, um, I think that there's a lot of memories I blocked out from my childhood because the subject is uh, very tender for me. Um, and so I do remember being treated differently in school in certain ways. I couldn't give an example right now until later in life from what I really remember, but I remember my father, explaining that there were that I was different and then I may be treated differently. But he more went on the side of explaining the way he grew up through the civil rights movement um, and stuff like that. So it was more nagging, whereas he would say, you know, you have it so much better now. I went through this, I went through that. Um, so even though it was explained to me that I will or may experience differences, um, I kind of shut down from the way he was approaching it. Um, and the majority of my friends growing up were white. Um, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. Um, and sorry, it's difficult. Um, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, and that was all I knew. And so it was either survive with the people that were around me or be cautious and possibly lose friends and possibly be alone. I think one thing that's important to add is that I am also a gay man. And so knowing that growing up, I was ostracized by the other black kids. That was also part of the reason I didn't have a lot of black friends, um, because I wasn't into sports. I was in all honors and AP classes growing up. So there was only a small number of black kids in there anyway, and most of them were female. Who I got along with, but they kind of kept to themselves. Um, and I was in band, so I was a dork from the beginning. um, so I just had to survive. So there were a lot of things in grade school that I heard from the other white kids. For example, um, they would use the N word, not towards me, and then they look at me and be like, "Oh well, you're not a nigger, you're just a black person." like because they liked me, so it was just and those kind of things I had to ignore in order to survive growing up. And I didn't realize until I was older that how much that really affected me. And there's a lot of shame that comes with that and guilt. um the shame is, uh how could I allow myself to put up with such uh, behavior? Um, and I think a lot of the guilt, you know, I mean, all these kind of things really made me hate myself. I hated the color of my skin. I hated how big my lips were. I hated um, how I had to moisturize, or didn't want to be quote unquote ashy, um, all of those ideas or learned behaviors from the environment I was around because I was being taught that it wasn't okay to basically it wasn't okay to be black or be myself, um, and I should conform and be like my white counterparts, I guess. The first, the real that bubble I put myself in burst when I turned 18. And I went to the mall to buy a book at Barnes and Noble. It was an outdoor section of the mall. It was a Friday evening when a lot of people around would talk about how the black kids would congregate at the movie theaters and be a little rowdy and then go see movies and whatever. So um anyway, I parked in front of the movie theater. I get out of my car. I'm walking towards Barnes and Noble, and that was when a security guard stepped in front of me, a white security guard, and stopped me and said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Barnes and Noble." And he looks me right in the eyes and he points to the right and says, "The bus stop is that way." And I stood there. I processed what he just said. I turned around. I got in my car. I burst into tears. And then I drove home. Um, I don't think I've ever really gotten over that moment. Um, the humiliation, um, it really just destroyed my world at that moment. So that's my first memory of really being, or my first experience where I allow myself to accept where I stand in society as a person of color. So,
Woo! When you had to accept where you stand as a person of color, man. Yeah, I can remember. It's interesting you put it that way. I can remember that moment for myself. I'm also a black gay man, so we relate on that level. And man, let me tell you, I totally understand the shame and the guilt that you're talking about. Although I will say it didn't hamstring me that much because I think probably because I'm a teacher and because I've seen I've seen that we're all the same. I've seen that humans are all the same and humans are making mistakes all the time, quite literally all the time, and humans are misperceiving things all the time, and it's part of what makes us human. And so I was like, how could I feel guilty about something that's literally a part of like me as like on the species level? Like I think I have to kind of learn to accept that I'm gonna be wrong. I'm gonna misperceive things, and all I can do and what I can control is like trying to perceive things more clearly by for me it's typically mathematics to understand what um, objective reality is. And so obviously that's coming into sharp focus here in 2023 as many people cannot tell the difference between fact and fiction. So that's what your story kind of made me think about. So you snapped out of it. 18 years old, you experienced that. So you kind of snapped out of it, which means you have to deal with all the backlash from understanding how you were acting, what it all meant, how you were thinking, what that all means. Now that your thinking is changing and you've experienced that and you've decided to openly accept the racial hierarchy as it has been cemented into American society because you were forced to. Um, what like how do you deal with that reality? For you, what was the next steps?
The next step was actually to learn how to love myself. Because like I said, I hated myself. I hated everything physically about me. Um, and that took a long time. Probably my entire college, at least my entire college experience. And sorry. Um, I think I understood. I have went through a lot of hardships in my childhood, not related to this. So I think I had understood that I need to love myself before anything else. And so that was really my focus. And I think the acceptance of where I am, of who I am in this country, just kind of followed. I think it's part of it. But that was my path. I had to learn how to love myself in order to accept where I stand, um, as a gay black man in this country. And I feel I think we've made great strides and things are changing for the better. People are listening. Um, we have so much work to do. Um, so I never try and bust anybody's bubble because I have these kind of conversations all the time with coworkers and people I meet, as I travel for work. So it's um, ugh.
It's extremely mentally taxing because this issue, these racial categories, they intrude into our relationships. Um, you know, I mean, I'll just put it out there. I dated a guy for 2.5 years. When the first day that I met him, he told me that the blackest thing about me was the way that I shake my ass. You would think
Mm,
that that would be a red flag
right?
that would make me turn away, but not at that time, because I was taught to let things like that just slide off. Like, oh, it's no big deal. Like, I shouldn't take it personally. This and that, blah blah blah.
All saying,
And yeah, so I mean, been there. I totally understand. Um, do you think you've
the
forgiven yourself by now?
um I have forgiven myself for most of it. I think I what I haven't forgiven myself for is how I treated my older brother, um because I was projecting my own racial insecurities onto him a lot of times. Um and I thought about that before I got on the show today, um, and how that was a thing, and I need to apologize to him for that. So, um, like I would make fun of him for the way he looked and this and that, but those were my insecurities, and yeah, yeah, it's
Well,
tough.
in the chat, Jujitsu Music says, so thoughtful and compassionate you thought of your brother in this way. I agree. So, uh, I'm sure he accepts your apology, and that's amazing, man. That you have grown so much to be able to reflect and come to this point. So well done to continue on your journey this far. Um, yeah, you know, it's I think a lot of people have trouble understanding that this is like a lifelong journey. You know, you're never gonna get to a point where um, racism is not going to end in our lifetime. This is a generations long crucible for all of us, no matter how we're racialized. This hierarchy has been imposed on literally all of us, not in the same way. And we don't all have negative consequences, or at least like not entirely negative consequences. The consequences vary depending upon what step ladder of the hierarchy you find yourself on. But things are changing, like you said. There's more and more interracial couples and multiracial children, right? There's people from all different ethnic backgrounds coming together, building families, building relationships. You said earlier that people are starting to listen, people are starting to communicate. And, I think the time is right. We can now connect with other humans all across the world. You mentioned that you travel a lot for work and you travel all around the world. Well, now we can connect to people all around the world. Like on this show, I've had Russian immigrants to the United States on. I've had people from the Middle East. I've had people from Canada. I've had people um, from South America. So you get to hear people from Mexico. You get to hear all these different experiences with race and racism, and I think it's really helpful for people to hear, because part of the consequences of imposing a racial hierarchy is that people don't have the same experience, right? And that people don't have access to everyone else's experience. So the only way to get it is to communicate. And that's why I'm so glad to hear that you consciously kind of communicate with strangers. It's very similar to me. I purposefully and consciously have these conversations with strangers, and uh, I've been told so many crazy things. Can you think of something wild that happened in a conversation you had about race with a stranger? And I'll tell maybe you can tell one and I'll tell one, or I can go first if you want.
I feel like most of the conversations where they kind of go left field have to do with uh just people saying how we're just complaining to complain, or it's not wild, but like it affects me so much, because it's like, but how about this? I'll tell you how I react to those instances. I don't allow it anymore. I tell these people, especially if it's at work, not in the office, but outside the office. Um, I don't allow it to continue, and I let them have it, and I give them a full piece of my mind in the most professional, respectful way I can, until they can't, and give them my experience so they can't refute it. Like, um that's all I can do, and I have to be confident when I do that, and I have to hold my ground. Um, and that's which is scary to some people, and but that's how I deal with that. I think, honestly, when I'm trying to think about instances, I think I still block out of a lot of things. It's actually kind of scary when I'm sitting here. Um,
I
I
mean,
block
it
I
makes
block
sense.
out a lot.
I mean, it makes sense though, because I mean, it is a lot. Like I mean, it's overwhelming. So just try to go easy on yourself a little bit, because like it makes sense. Like you've dealt with a lot through your life, and yeah, you've got some powerful defense mechanisms, but listen, it's a lifelong process. We're all gonna we're continuing on. You're recognizing it. That's a positive, all right? So now I'll tell you my story, which is very similar to yours, actually. So I was invited to the Jersey Shore by a racialized white friend of mine to her family gathering. Okay, so we all kind of gathered together. It was like her entire white family, Italian immigrant background family, all coming together as one, with the matriarch, the grandmother, very tough woman, very beautiful and strong woman, very respected woman in the household, and then it was everyone else, the whole fam. And we're at this lake house that they've built from the ground up and rebuilt after a hurricane tore it down. And we're in the pool, and I am having one-on-one conversation with the matriarch. And it's the exact experience that you described. She is like, "Oh my God, I love Candace Owens. She's so great." She's like, "Oh, like black people have it so good now. Like, there's so many opportunities if you're black." Saying all of these things, because of all the black people she talks to about that and all the black people she knows. And I'm
Oh,
just,
I get it. That's sarcasm.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So basically, I just start rattling off my life experiences to her, exactly the same way you described. I'm just like, really? That's news to me because boo, 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 boo. And I'm machine gun firing this woman, this poor woman. And you can just see her face. Like, you can see her desperately trying to cling to the illusion of what she believed black people were experiencing in the country. And it just like being forced to fall away. And she's clinging on and it's just falling, falling, falling. And
Mm-hmm.
she is actually getting angry. She's
Mm-hmm.
enraged. And she's holding, I can literally see her holding back her anger. Not her anger at the injustices that I face, not her anger at the racism that I've had to
Uh-huh.
endure, but anger that I am forcing her to learn about
Uh-huh.
it and
Mm-hmm.
to shatter the illusion that she built for herself. Um,
Yep.
it was a wild experience for me because I was just like, wow, like, um, you are more angry that I'm forcing you to accept my reality than that my reality is what it is. And that's what we're up against, kind of.
Did you say that to her?
No, no, no. I was in her house. Are you kidding me? I already pushed her. I pushed her extremely far. Actually, my
Mhm.
friend was kind of like I was like, yeah, I don't think that I don't know if she wants me to come back here actually because um she actually she made a joke. You know how when people say, "Oh, you can never come back" or like whatever.
Yeah.
Well, she made that joke, but like there was like a tinge of like
She meant it.
seriousness, in
Well,
there.
she
I don't
meant
think she
it.
wanted to be serious about it, but like her emotions were telling her to like not have me back there. I did go back, by the way, just FYI, spoiler alert,
Wow.
and it was fine. But yeah, I actually the next time I went back, I had another conversation. This time with her son-in-law, and high-ranking military officer again. And when we got to the part where we were talking about racism and its impacts, he goes, "Oh, you just gotta, find a way over that." That's that's what he said. I was
Let
like,
me do
"Oh,
that. I'll
tell
get
me,
right
yeah.
on that.
Why don't you tell me how? Tell me your experience of getting over it. That's what I was thinking. I didn't say that, but like, it's just so funny that to me, and this happens on social media in real life, that so many racialized white people will think that they have the answer, think that they know what we should be doing to deal with this toxic racial environment, only because it's an illusory environment, that they've created in their own mind oftentimes. And they're not interested in what we have to say about the reality that we're living. So it's really kind of like impenetrable fortress of like illusion, is a way of describing white supremacy as well. So yeah, this show is just my attempt of trying to help dispel that illusion, to try to unravel the cognitive dissonance that people have wrapped themselves into, so that if somebody tells you the blackest thing about you is that you can shake your ass, then you don't date them. And you say, bye, that was racist. See ya. Instead of, hey, let's get into a 2.5 year relationship
Right.
and then realize it.
Um, it's tough. I did like what you said about friends. There's been relationships I have pretty much ended because I just have I they're not worth it. I'm at a point now. I'm about to reach my late 30s ish, and I don't have time. I don't have time anymore to teach new people that I want to, you know, have a relationship with, a friendship, whatever. Um, I don't have it in me anymore. My time is precious. That's also something I've learned over the years. Um, and I have a great example. And it's a little political, but I recently met someone in London, and we went to a concert together, and we were chit-chatting, and all of a sudden we're starting to talk about America. Um, he's obviously English, and he said he's a Trump supporter, and I'm like, oh, uh, like why? And his one and only response is that he's the only president that didn't start a war. One of the only US presidents that didn't start a war. And I'm like, he's starting a civil war. like, like, I'm confused. There are presidents that inherited wars. There's, it was just it. There was no backing to this at all. Um, um, no real logic, no facts. And I'm just like, yeah, he didn't start a war with another country during his term, but he did something worse. He created such unrest in his own country, um, just by being a figure of white supremacy. Literally brought people out of their houses into the streets to say, now we can be racist, like literally, that's what it feels
And
like.
they listen, let me
People
tell
like
you, they
us
lap that up.
so much, and I had to dismiss myself from that situation because we can't be friends. Yet, did I school him after a couple of cocktails? Yes, I did school him. But he's too passive. He doesn't care enough. And that's not the life I want to live. Those aren't the people I want to be around. So yeah, and I have that choice. It's my life, my friendships. And yeah, I literally had to deal with that less than 2 weeks ago. Um,
Wow. Did you like actually leave the concert?
this was after the concert.
Okay, so you were like, let me get some drinks in me and just lay some things on the table for a second, and then
Well, it just kind of popped up. I mean, we went to concert, we already drinking. So it popped up and I was like, oh no. Okay. This
yeah,
this
no.
this is over.
Wow.
I'm gonna go
Uh,
back to my hotel.
what else do we have here? Oh yeah, are you familiar with the laws that are being passed that are about teaching about race in the education system?
Uh I haven't researched into it. Yes, I've heard things.
Let me
Uh
actually pull up the text of one of these laws, okay? Now
it,
you said you're in Georgia. I'm going to see if I can see if Georgia has one of these laws. I think they do. So,
Most likely.
So so, let me see if I can find it. Hang on. Let's see. Georgia. Let's see. Yep, here we go. April of 2022. Georgia becomes latest U.S. state to ban divisive concepts. Divisive is in quotes in teaching about race. And this is from Reuters. It says Georgia on Thursday joined a growing number of Republican led U.S. states to ban schools from teaching divisive academic concepts about racism. The measures are part of a movement among conservatives targeting the teaching of critical race theory, in academic theory that looks at structural racism in U.S. institutions that is not generally taught at the elementary or high school level. Not just generally, almost exclusively not.
Because it's literally a high level a subject. Like it's not something you teach to children. It's not something you can teach to children. No?
No,
Am I wrong?
100%. You're 100% right. Yeah, like I mean, this is
They don't have
like
the
graduate
capacity
level.
to understand.
Yeah, this is graduate level, post graduate level stuff here. It says here in Georgia, our classrooms will not be pawns to those who indoctrinate our kids with their partisan political agendas. That's the Republican Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia said at a bill signing ceremony in Cumming, Georgia on Thursday. The package of bills protects the fundamental right of moms and dads across this state. I wonder what moms and dads are talking about there. To direct the education of their child. The bill prohibits any instruction that asserts that the United States is, quote, fundamentally racist, unquote, or that says individuals should, quote, feel anguish, guilt, or any other form of discomfort or stress because of their race. So literally, we would be banned about talking about our own experiences growing up, learning about race and experiencing racism under this law. It goes on. Several states, including Texas, Arizona, and Oklahoma, have passed similar bans. Most don't mention critical race theory by name. Okay, instead they give this kind of litany of racial qualifiers to what you can and can't say. Blah, 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 blah. There was a strong condemnation by somebody. It doesn't really matter who because it didn't stop anything. And yeah, Kemp, he then got reelected, right? after this. So he's still the governor, and these laws are on the books and active in the state of Georgia. So what's your reflection on that, given your experience?
Well, the current political environment is anything anti is from a far right perspective. Well, from my perspective, the far right is very anti anything that's not straight and white and male. So it's disheartening. Am I surprised? No, not at all. Everybody's just following suit. They don't have anything else to, in my opinion, they're not providing anything else. They're not able to provide anything else to the society. And so they're using a lot of fear mongering, a lot of big words, a lot of, I'm trying to be polite.
Scare words.
Huh?
I would say they're weaponizing fear.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, the fear that
Weaponizing
people
fear,
already
absolutely.
that we've both encountered. When we have these conversations, a fear of like accepting the reality of the world as it exists, accepting the country as it exists. One thing I would say is that like part of what I want to do with this show is, to me, America should accept anti-racism as one of its fundamental values. It's right in line with life, liberty, and the pursuit of
Absolutely.
happiness. So, I mean, to me, and freedom. So it's right aligned with all of the country's other values, but it's crystal clear at this point, not just at the state level, but also at the federal level, that that is not something that is going to ever happen, or at least not
Not
anytime
that
soon.
soon.
Yeah, you know, we've got an old white man in the presidency as per usual, and you know, he's just trying to say the right things, you know, to get black people to vote for him as per usual. You
Hmm.
know, in terms of tangible deliverables, creating a movement by that originates in the highest office of the land and letting that trickle down of anti-racism. Now that's something that would be game changing. Something that I think was a missed opportunity by Barack Obama. Truly, you know, I was like, that's what I was hoping for. I was really hoping for him to be like, listen, I got here now, and
I'm pretty sure he came out and said, I wish I did more. I wish I wasn't silent, but in our position, and this is when I had to sympathize with him, you know, when you get to that, you get to the highest power and position in the land. Um, you now have to question, do I just go full force, you know, in doing the right thing, or do I just kind of lay low and just, you know, tread in the water? And I think he treaded in the water,
yeah, I mean, he
and
definitely did.
he admitted it. He admitted it, and he regrets it, and as he should. Well, I mean, not he shouldn't beat himself up for it. He made a decision in the moment, and it's a decision many of us probably would have made. You know, it's a politics is tough.
Yeah, I mean, he's a human being, right? He has a family. His family's in
Exactly.
that environment, you know. So he definitely did the calculus, and it's not like he didn't do anything at all, but very little.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, I agree.
it's unfortunate. One thing I always talk about, and one reason why the fear that we were talking about is such a powerful weapon that is wielded, is because ultimately there's no way of doing anti-racism without making sacrifices. There really
Hmm.
is no way. Like, you have to sacrifice in order to do it, because we live in such a virulently racist environment. We live under this hierarchy still. So if you're going to fight against it, you're going to feel that. You're going to feel that fight. You're going to feel it a lot, because that's the environment that we're in. So it's a decision you've got to make. And it's not an easy decision. And it's specifically not easy for racialized white people, because you don't really have to make it, right? Like, I mean, you could leave the question hanging for your entire life and then just, you know, or just choose to do it whenever you feel like it, which my guest recently talked about. He was like, yeah, I started asking the question about race, like, what race am I? And then I just like kind of like forgot about it for like 2 decades. Then I came back to it, you know, like, and so
Uh-huh.
like it's that luxury, right, of not having to necessarily deal with all of these pinpricks that you and I have experienced throughout the course of our existence and continuing to experience. Um, so yeah,
And I say that literally every week to different people when I have this conversation. I'm like, I don't have the luxury. And I've had to say that to my husband. I don't have the luxury of not, worrying about my safety. I don't have the luxury of just ignoring when someone calls me, you know, a name or dehumanizes me or demeans me or so it's yeah.
so we've got about
Can I
13 minutes left. Feel free to go for it.
can I put something out there?
Yeah, put it out.
I just um I just want to comment that the point of this show is you have people of all kinds of views on here, and you do. So there's opposing views you speak to, and there's also people you have on that have similar views as your own. Um, I just want to put that out there. And the only way you can get to love, peace, and understanding is is by conversing about it. You have to go to war, but you have to be able to listen to both sides. So yeah, and this is why I love what you do and why I came on the shows, because you're having that conversation with people from all different backgrounds, all different kinds of people with opposing views. And I think that's really important.
Thank you
Um,
so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, and the reason why I do it is the same reason why I use the term racialized. We're all in this together. I know that's not what people have taught. I know that's not what people have learned, but that's our reality. Is that we're all in this together. Even though the consequences of the imposition of a racial hierarchy hasn't affected us all the same way, we're all dealing with it at the same time, for generations now. And so we need to acknowledge that, and we need to move from that reality into a reality that's, like you said, more full of love, more full of peace, more full of respect, less full of dehumanization. And that's the way that we're going to advance the species, like we advance by collaboration, not by division. And if we truly want to collaborate, then we have to respect other people's humanities. Otherwise, it's a false collaboration. Okay, so that's what I'm working towards. Conversation can have power to bring us together.